Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our third session of the Commissioner's Oversight of Policing Services. For those of you who haven't joined us before, this is the COP session, as you can see over our shoulders. And this is where the Chief Constable and I'm putting your questions to the Chief Constable to hold her to account for the policing services across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So good evening, Olivia.
Good evening.
Right, so we've had some questions sent in advance, and for those of you that haven't joined us before, and a quick reminder for those of you that have, we are answering your questions as they're coming in. We have got some pre-submitted ones. I've got a variety of quite good questions that have come in. We're going to try and get through all of the questions, and for those questions that we don't get through, we will be trying to get back to everybody over the next sort of couple of days to make sure that all of the comments online are also addressed. I would say anything in relation, of course, to any kind of ongoing live investigation, please do not share any information, and please think very carefully about the information you're sharing publicly. This is being live streamed, and a copy of this COP session will also be available on both the Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner Facebook page, my own Donna Jones Police Commissioner Facebook page, and Olivia's Hampshire Constabulary one. So please be mindful that what you put down, others will also be able to view. But please put your comments in the comment section, because Olivia and I are keeping an eye on them, and we are going to try and answer them. And if you could also put where you're from, so if you're asking a question about ASB and you live in the New Forest or you live in Basingstoke, it will really help us to tailor our answers much more specifically to you as well. So we're going to get started with a couple of the pre-submitted questions, so that it gives people a chance to join us online as well. And the first question is around the horrific situation that's going on in Ukraine at the moment. And of course, our thoughts are very much with the victims directly affected by the conflict and their families. And of course, some of those people do live here in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight as well. So it's obviously a tragic situation. So whilst we're not directly affected, there is a secondary impact. This is the question. There is a secondary impact that comes in terms of protesting and also the impacts of what's going on in Ukraine. So to Olivia, really the question is around how does it impact Hampshire Constabulary, and what are you doing as Chief Constable?
Yes, of course, and you're absolutely right, Commissioner. All of our thoughts are with people there and with their loved ones here, and people who are worried here about people in Ukraine and surrounding countries, of course, some of whom work within the constabulary. So we're very, very mindful of that, and that's where our thoughts are. When we saw what was happening in Ukraine over a month ago now, what we put in place within the constabulary was a command structure for all the things that were or could affect policing and us as an organisation, of course. So in terms of policing for our communities, our thoughts, first of all, went to people who live here, Russians and Ukrainians within our communities, of which there are many, and making sure that they felt supported and that they knew where to go if they worried about anything, both from us, but also from local authority, schools, and so on and so forth. So we put that in first of all, and that's our job really, and that's where the neighbourhood policing model really kicks in when something awful like this happens, because they are very quickly able within their own neighbourhoods to know who's about and to make those connections. So that's the first thing we did. We're really alive always when anything happens around the globe to hate crime, because we know that can spike. So we're monitoring that really carefully. I'm pleased to say we haven't seen a spike around that, but it's something we're very vigilant towards, of course. So that was where we went to as well. We have a role with all the local authorities and other partners, as we do when anything major happens in the community. But with refugees coming in to the country, that primarily rests with the local authorities, and our job is to support them should they need it. Right now, that's really light touch from a policing perspective. I think in terms of the specifics regarding protest, I would describe what we've seen thus far as vigils, as peaceful vigils, which of course the policing is there to support so that everyone can be safe in doing that, can make sure that others around them can go about their business peacefully and lawfully, and we try and get that balance right. And thus far, that's been absolutely the tone that we've seen around our area, and we expect that to continue. There have been some protests which you could describe as having a dotted line, if you like, to Ukraine in terms of fuel protests and that kind of thing. And we saw some of those last weekend. Really, really good, thorough, confident policing response to some protests over on Southampton Water, or just on the land next to Southampton Water. And you'll have seen that going on around the rest of other parts of the UK as well. So you know, we're very close to that intelligence. We're ready should that happen again. I hope it won't.
Yeah, and I have to say as well, Olivia, I think some of the police officers that you're employing and police staff, the charity, the collections, the bravery that's going on in some of them to be offering to help is also really, really commendable. So, and I just want to say a good evening to Jason Piggott. He's joined us online. He has a Ukraine flag as his icon. So thank you, Jason, for your support there of the Ukraine, and also Lee Godden, who's joined us online, first timer to COPS this evening. Hello, Lee. And he says good evening to both Olivia and I. So thank you very much for joining us. If you have just joined, please put your comments in the comments box, because we're working our way through them right now. So on to the next question. And this is one from Terence Pearson, who lives on the Isle of Wight. And it's about police officers, police officer numbers and visibility. And the question is, Chief Constable, are you planning to have beat police on the Isle of Wight again anytime soon? Almost everybody that I know agrees that this is what is needed. At present, all I ever see are police cars speeding around the tricky island roads, usually with their blue lights on and sirens going.
So, Terence, be assured we absolutely do have and have always had a dedicated, bespoke neighbourhood team for the Isle of Wight. They number over 60 people, so that's police officers and police community support officers, and they're also supported by brilliant volunteers in the Special Constabulary. So they are there every day, 365, doing exactly what you're describing. They have other colleagues who are response colleagues for those emergencies, also road policing, firearms, investigators. You know, all the different elements of policing are on the Isle of Wight all the time and are there to deal with and to support the communities there. So we are going to have more, of course, because we have got additional police officers coming through all the time. So those numbers are going to increase, but right now you absolutely have them, and they're doing some fantastic work. Just recently, a couple of drugs warrants in Sandown and Barding, £5,000 worth of Class A drugs recovered, 3 people arrested. Fantastic work going on in Ryde, as there is always, but particularly after the tragic murder there earlier in the year. And they've been doing an awful lot around e-scooters and things that I know, you know, through the Commissioner, really clear on what, you know, are the worries on the Isle of Wight, and they're very proactive, working with local authorities and others to get ahead of those kind of things. So be assured that they're very connected, and please tell them, you know, what your priorities are, and they will look to flex accordingly.
Thank you, Olivia. And I have to say that, you know, there has been some excellent work done in terms of detection of some of the most serious crimes that have happened on the Isle of Wight since Christmas. So, you know, hats off as well there to the investigations command over on the island. Another question in relation to police officer numbers. Of the 43 police forces in England and Wales, Hampshire Constabulary ranks 40th in terms of police officers per capita. Despite a rise to 3,040 officers in 2021, the number is still well below the 2008 peak of 3,912. With a steady growing population and rising crime, particularly violent and sexual offences, does the Chief Constable believe that returning to historical police numbers and more policing visibility is vital to combating crime and ensuring public trust in her force?
So we have got more police officers than 3 years ago, and that number will increase over the next 12 months as well. But I would love to have as many police officers, police staff, volunteers as I can get, Commissioner. And I promise to make very good use of them. And we're really clear, you know, we are very, very productive as a police service. But you're absolutely right. We know, you know, we don't have that fair funding compared to other forces, but I make best use of every pound that the Commissioner, of your money that the Commissioner gives to me for that operational policing. So we're on target to get our over 600 extra police officers come 12 months time, which is the promise that was made and the Commissioner has funded. Visible policing in your communities is really important. We can't be everywhere all the time. but we are out there, just as I've described, on the Isle of Wight, with neighbourhood teams, with response, with specialist firearms officers and dogs and roads policing people who are all connected with all of the information about what's going on in our different areas, as well as having their own specialist roles. But you're absolutely right, we do have an increase in serious crime that needs investigating. So we also invest very, very heavily in detectives, both police officers and specialist police staff investigators too, who can do exactly the same job as each other to investigate all that crime. So whilst they may not be in police cars, they're absolutely out in communities investigating crime, supporting witnesses, getting hold of offenders, and fighting crime in that way. So yes, it is brilliant to be having more and more and more. I would love to have as many as I possibly could, and my promise would be I would put them to very good use.
Yeah, and on a related point on that one as well, and that question came from Dave Wilcock, by the way, so thank you, Dave, for asking that question, is that I go over to the island every sort of 6 weeks, sometimes more often, if there are meetings with the local authority or with town councils, Ryde Town Council, for example, and we are looking at the facilities on the Isle of Wight as well, about, you know, a new police hub to incorporate the armed response and the roads policing and the investigation command and the neighbourhood policing. So there's lots and lots going on over there. I've also had quite a lot of contact with the HMP Isle of Wight, so both Albany and Parkhurst, and we're working with the Ministry of Justice on the Camp Hill site as well, which, as many of you islanders will know, is closed. So lots going on there. Right.
Can I interrupt
just
a little bit more just to the question about visibility? Because yes, more police officers, but also it's the accessibility of policing as well. So our online presence, which isn't for everyone, I accept that, but it is for a lot of people this very evening doing this kind of meeting. You know, we have millions of people who engage with us through our Facebook posts, through our neighbourhood teams all the time. And that's a really great way of people finding out what's going on in the neighbourhoods, what their police are doing about it, and also engaging backwards and forwards. So accessibility can be online as well as real world. Sorry.
No, that's a really good point. It's fun. I mean, like you say, this is the example, isn't it? Us on screens now talking and going through answering people's queries. 2 million people in the Isle of Wight, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. This is the best way to let everyone get access to both yourself and I, Olivia. Moving on to the next question. This is related to PCSOs from John Nightingale. PCSOs need to have more protection. PCSOs are more frontline than cops, but don't have decent PPE or protection, handcuffs or tasers. Put that one to you.
So police community support officers are absolutely integral to our overall policing service. We've had, I think it's 20 years of PCSOs coming up later this year. And I remember, because I'm old enough, I remember when they came in, and it is the biggest change and the most welcome change in the whole of my policing career. They're absolutely brilliant, because PCSOs do what, and it's behind so many of the questions, is that connection with local community. They know their local community, they are known by them, they know who's vulnerable, they know who's causing difficulties for other people and committing crimes. That's their role, and they're brilliant at it. And they're there every day, and they help problem solve. They do have really good equipment. So they have radios, and that is the way that all of our people keep themselves most safe, because they have that instant communication with their colleagues and with our control room. So they have that, they have their body armor. But the reason they don't have all those other pieces of equipment that you're describing is it's a very deliberate one, not to make them unsafe, far from it. And I'm really close to the PCSOs. I'm very close to Unison, who represents them. So, you know, and we have this conversation often. If PCSOs had more equipment, which would come with more powers, they would then become police officers. And that means that when they're on very different contracts. So a police officer, I can move them around the place all the time, and I do, depending on what the particular needs are. It's the nature of our job. Just much like running a hospital, you're balancing different demands all the time. That's what we do, and that's fine. But PCSOs are absolutely contracted and committed to their locality. And if that mission creep came in, then actually my worry is that I wouldn't be able to make the commitment that they would be in their communities and in their neighbourhoods, and that's where they'd stay. So it's only in real extremists that they're removed from that, for the reasons that I say, because PCSOs are at the heart of neighbourhood policing. And that's why they have good equipment, they have plenty of it, they're really skilled people, they're fantastic communicators. And we're also very careful about where we deploy them to look after them and to balance that with their role within the community too.
Excellent, thank you very much. And I think it's, credit to Hampshire Constabulary and to Olivia and her Chief Officer group that actually, whilst a lot of forces PCSO numbers have dropped over the last few years, actually Hampshire has maintained, I think it's in excess of 260 PCSOs, if I remember the number, 268, I think. Yeah. But we're doing so well there, and that they do make such a difference. And so many of you will know your local PCSO. So thank you to the excellent army of PCSOs out there. And also just a final point on the numbers as well, that just a plug for something I did for you as your commissioner, if that's right. So 498 is our share of the 20,000 nationally. But if you remember last year when I got elected as your police and crime commissioner, pledged 600 to go above and beyond. Hampshire wants to be better. Hampshire and the Isle of Wight want to go above and beyond. And that's why we're really striving for that extra number. Olivia and I work very closely on setting the budget, on making sure there was the money, on getting all that stuff in place, remove wastage, spend money where it's needed on more police staff and also PCSOs. Right, okay, so moving on, we've got another question around Lee Gadden asks, sorry, I've got your name wrong twice this evening, Lee Godden asks, will you be changing the insignia of Hampshire Police to include the words Isle of Wight?
We will, Commissioner. You conducted a poll and was very huge support for us incorporating the name of the Isle of Wight within the constabulary's name and all of that means. So we are working through, it has to be laid before Parliament, so it has to become law, but we are getting ready for that. It's actually, there's some bits that are more complicated than you think, which I've learnt about. So things like our data returns into central national data sets, all the different lines that all means, all that coding, all of that side of stuff, which is pretty complicated. But in terms of the visible side of things, we will, through natural turnover, update uniforms, epaulets, those kind of things. So, we're not going to throw stuff out and waste anything. We will change the insignia and move that through as things very naturally get replaced. There are some things that will need to be new, kind of signs outside of our buildings, but they're pretty few and far between. So we're really keen to keep the cost down, but actually we absolutely will be including it, and we're doing some workings out of what kind of that artwork might look like. We really want to keep the strong legacy and history of our badges and all that matters to our communities, and it matters to our people enormously, but we are working through how that might be. We actually already have the largest police hat badge in the world. So it'll just be a bit bigger in the fullness of time with more letters on it.
There we go. Well, that was fantastic. And we're really hoping that will be laid down for Parliament before the summer recess. So watch this space. We will update you as soon as we get the formal confirmation. But thank you to everyone on the Isle of Wight who made their case so strongly to us during the consultation period as well about supporting that. Kevin Ellington asking about updating the police estate. I think I've kind of covered that one, Kevin. So more information will come back to you. We've currently got some money through the One Public Estate Cabinet Office programme, working with Hampshire Fire and Rescue on some of the solutions around the police estate. So we will come back on that one. Okay, so Simon Tav, the question says, reminding people that you can follow neighbourhood teams in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight on social media. We had 192,000 comments received so far to our neighbourhood watch teams in just 1 year. Wow. That is amazing. Would you mind sharing my social media platforms on your pages, please? That's really great. But you're absolutely right. Social media is so powerful. Another question. Putting names and addresses online to allow people who've been convicted. Two sides of the argument being argued out is that Hampshire Constabulary, but what is the Hampshire Constabulary position on naming people? So let me just read this again. On Facebook pages, putting people's names and addresses online if they've been convicted of offences. What is Hampshire Constabulary's position on naming people who've been convicted of an offence or even reported of an offence? Sure.
So there's really strict laws about what and when can be put in the public domain. And there's a world of difference between confirming something that may be out through whatever medium out there and actually confirming that that's true. as a public authority. So we have to be really careful, and we are really careful. So when someone is convicted, that becomes then a matter for the court, and the court in terms of what's published. When someone is charged with an offence, so that's when the CPS have made a decision usually that someone is going to go to court later on, then that time someone can be named. The issues, and that's all set in law. Very, very, very rarely will we name someone who's under investigation, and pretty much we would only do that if we're worried that there may be other people at risk. So you know, it's very clearly set out. The rules are in law, and the interpretation of those is set very robustly by the College of Policing, as it should be, because this is about everyone's, you know, the balance of someone's privacy against public interest and public safety, and those have to be balanced.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And just to clarify, the 192,000 comments, whilst I'm sure Neighbourhood Watch, like me, would love to have that many comments, that was actually on the Hampshire Constabulary social media Facebook pages and platforms. So sorry, a slight misinformation from me there. Okay, moving on to the very popular topic of ASB, which everybody loves. Frank Adams has asked, on your last live chat, Olivia said that she was very concerned about antisocial behaviour, and in particular motorbikes usually being stolen and ridden dangerously. I'm not aware of a single prosecution as yet. When are you going to take appropriate action?
Well, we absolutely have taken action, actually. So last time, I mean, it is something, as I said last time, that concerns me, and we have done an awful lot around it. So just to give you an update since last time. So the Commissioner has funded 3 unmarked motorbikes. So we have a blend of those. So we have unmarked bikes on the roads where we know reports of very high speed motorcycling goes on. So we've got the wherewithal to get alongside them, frankly, and do stop them and prosecute them. We've also got new tactics since we last spoke on this meeting about how we can stop antisocial behaviour as well with motorbikes. So stop sticks, which you may be aware of for cars, which is effectively a tube with spikes on it. It's more complicated than that, but that's largely what it is, which goes into the tyre. We've now got those for motorbikes too, and we used them only in Southampton last week. So they are out and about. We also have road legal off-road motorbikes, so ones that we can drive around to get to places and then use off-road, both in and out of uniform. So again, we do have the ability and do work, you know, to catch people who are driving in an antisocial way. So we do that, and we use drones as well, so we can follow people around from the air, which is a brilliant tactic. So during the month of March, just to give you in Southampton, which is where I think last time we talked about, because that's where it was really prevalent. In the month of March, we've arrested 10 people relating to motorcycle criminality. We've seized 5 stolen motorbikes, and we've done a lot of really high intensity patrols alongside the local authority to work out which areas are vulnerable to it, and a lot of which of course comes from reports into us. We don't ignore that, of course, but you know, we use that information to work out with the local authority where's a vulnerable location and what can be put in place, you know, fences, barriers, all that kind of stuff, to actually stop the motorbikes coming through in the first place. So we have done a lot. Really, you know, the Commissioner's really enabled that by us buying new equipment. We've got people trained up to do it. We're very comfortable with the tactics, and we do use them.
Thank you very much. And the next question, kind of linked to this as well, is from Alan Parker, and this is really focused on the Winchester area. In the context of tackling antisocial behaviour, what does robust policing mean? You often read this term in policing reports.
Yes, it's a good challenge, actually. It is quite a policey word, so perhaps we should stop using it. What we mean by that is, and I'm going to challenge myself now to stop using that, is where we're really positive. You know, we have perhaps asked nicely once or twice, and then we said enough is enough. So we arrest, we'll put someone into court, or we do other things, which if it's not something that should be going to court, we deal with it another way. So lots and lots of things like, you know, particularly out of court disposals with young people. There's lots of interventions we can do to help them realise the impact of what they've done and stop them doing it again. So that means, you know, not just, letting things pass us by, because there are certain things that only the police should do and only the police can do. Our staff and my staff need to be very confident in doing that. So that's what robust policing means. It doesn't mean necessarily physically strong, although there is an element of policing, of course, which has physicality and confrontation alongside it on occasion. But what it means is positive, confident, making use of all the tools in our toolbox, which are many, and making sure that someone doesn't do what they're going to do again, and that people are protected accordingly.
Thank you very much. So yeah, a good challenge. I quite like it. I mean, I quite like robust policing as a phraseology, because I think it denotes action, but maybe that's just me. Right, okay, so moving on, about final one, I think, on anti-social behaviour. You say, I'm not sure if this is you or me, Olivia, the question is, you say antisocial behaviour reported is down. I believe that you are not receiving the full facts when the Winchester City Council states we are in constant communication with the police, but they are reluctant to intervene. The question is, how does this policy protect the general public?
Well, there isn't a policy at all. I mean, we do take antisocial behaviour seriously. It is a shared responsibility with the local authorities, and in Winchester, as everywhere, that works well. We're clear on where the police need to do things, and local authorities are too. And the Commissioner has her own antisocial behaviour task force, where she brings us together with local authorities and others to kind of work out what we can all do together to tackle a particular problem. So, antisocial behaviour in Winchester is certainly, according to our reports, not spiking. But we, and certainly when we came out of lockdown, there was some change in the nature of that when the pubs opened and that kind of thing. And there are some areas that have been, quite a perpetual difficulty. And I was patrolling in Winchester not that long ago and went through King's Walk, for example. And I know that King's Walk is a district priority. So, and there are regular patrols in there. My colleagues in Winchester know who the persistent offenders are, and they do everything they can with loads of creative other people to try and help people get out of whatever rut they're in their lives, to change behaviour, to get the support if they need support to do that. But equally, we do use the full force of the criminal justice system. That goes back to me saying, what only the police can do. So we do that, and we do get community behaviour order applications and get them successfully through as well. So we know how to do that. It is a question of us, being, keep on going, because you can find these things can be cyclical. You can kind of deal with a certain season or a certain group of people very successfully. It goes quiet for a while, and then it can come back. So we also really want to get sustained changes so things don't keep reappearing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And actually, I had some contact from Trinity Lighthouse in the centre of Winchester just the other day about how we can be supporting and working with them. And there is a lot of work going on in Winchester. And in fact, Olivia and I were with some of the Winchester Neighbourhood Policing team just last night at something. So some very commendable work going on. Okay. So moving on to a question from Basingstoke. In Basingstoke, there are accredited council community safety patrol officers with an assortment of powers. ASB has changed dramatically over the last few years, but from reading the Basingstoke Council website, they have no powers to take cannabis off children or anyone. Why is this? And to continuation, they are always out and about, and I have seen them trying to advise 12 to 14-year-olds about not smoking cannabis in a communal area, in a block of flats, for example, and they get greeted with, you don't have the powers to tell us not to do that. Safety officers are great asset to the community, seen them breaking up fights with youths, taking alcohol off under 18s. They're a brilliant asset to Basingstoke. Do the safety officers in Basingstoke work with the police? Do they go out and patrol the police officers? And can they radio for the police, or do they have the power to call 101? Have you, as Chief Constable, met any of the safety officers? I'd like to see more of them out and about.
Lots of questions in there.
Lots of questions.
So the community safety officers are brilliant in Basingstoke, as they are in other places as well. I have met them. I have met them when I've been out and about on patrol, and they are a brilliant asset. They work very closely to our neighbourhood policing team, so our local officers, local special constables, local PCSOs, and they patrol together too. And they do have different powers, exactly as you describe, and their powers are given to them, granted to them by the Chief Constable, and there are only certain ones that I can give them in law, and seizing cannabis isn't one of them. So it's I can't give that to them, and there isn't at the moment a way that can be done. So that's frankly why they don't have it, but they do have lots of other powers. Their role is subtly different from policing, but as I say, it's a real kind of marriage of people with different skills and things. They tend to tackle some of the less significant, less serious cases of antisocial behaviour, but equally important, of course, to the people suffering them. So they deal with fly tipping, which has been really important, and it was particularly, wasn't it, in lockdown. They deal with dog fouling, but they also do come across, because they are out and about, they come across all sorts of other things as well. They absolutely have radio contact into their police, so they have that immediate way of getting hold of people. And then also they are in the same planning, prioritising, tasking, information sharing groups that you would expect to be going on for Basingstoke and for elsewhere. So they're there all the time, and they will task the police, and the police will task them with stuff that is best fit to one another. They also work in the same place. So in Basingstoke, they're all together up there in the civic offices, so they know each other really, really well. And I think certainly when it comes to the more serious antisocial behaviour work as well, whether it's people doing that or serious hotspots, we do look together at what we can each do, and we work that out. So it's a really close relationship along the lines that I've just described.
And I think credit to Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council on this one for actually continuing the funding for those community safety officers. And I know that I went out with Matt Reeves, who's the district commander for Basingstoke, one of Olivia's chief inspectors up there, and with the neighbour policing team. And we went to actually have a look at an issue with the flats opposite the train station, sort of one of the car parks underneath the block of flats, where people were taking drugs and whatever. And I'd spoken to them about the ASB task force and said, right, there is some money here where we could potentially get a charity to come do some outreach work to try and really prevent this. The community officers gripped the issue, working with the local neighbour policing team, and it stopped a whole load of issues of the drug taking on the staircase, concrete staircase in the car park there, and also some of the untoward behaviour that was going on in the shop opposite the train station that sells alcohol, it's like an off-licence shop. Some great work going on. So well done to Basingstoke and Dean. Okay, moving on now, slight change of topic, moving on to firearms licensing. And this is a question from Dr. Jonathan Glasspool, who says that shotgun and firearms licensing department seems to not be funded or adequately resourced. He claims that the grants have not been processed properly. It's not all about the impact of COVID. It wasn't great before COVID. And there are many people who use shotguns for vocational purposes, not just, and also business purposes. So questions to Chief Constable, what is being done in terms of shotgun licenses to not detriment people who would like to have one?
Yeah, no, I'm really glad to ask this, because I would challenge back around the pre-COVID service. It was very strong. We were turning them around in really good time, and in fact getting quite a lot of thanks for doing that, because we had massively shifted in the years before that in our processes. We'd automated a lot. There was a lot of self-serving, which we were getting good feedback on from people applying and getting renewals. So pre-COVID, we were in a good place. You're absolutely right. Behind your question, though, we have up until this Monday, last Monday, the 1st, we were pausing applicants, and that is not because of COVID, far from it. It's not because we didn't have the people to do it. We will only grant a firearms application when we have proper input from someone's doctor. We've had that in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight for some years now. That's been our standard, and actually that is the standard that is very likely the rest of the country will follow. But we've been doing that for a long, long time. So quite understandably, the health system was not in a position to prioritise putting reports in for leisure users of firearms. So they weren't doing it. And we were told they weren't, They had to try and keep other backlogs down. We know all about that, don't we, in terms of the real strains the health system has been suffering and in part continues to suffer. So we weren't in a position to grant applicants because we didn't have the information that would keep the applicant and the public potentially safe as to whether someone was well enough to have a firearm. That was not the same for people who needed it for their work. So we did not stop and have not stopped processing firearms of people who needed it for their work. And we would go to GPs and say, please, look, this is someone's livelihood here. They need your input. And then, of course, the GP was happy to do that and to give us that information. So we did pause for leisure. We did not pause for people who needed it for their work. Now the GPs have written to us and say, we're back up, we can do it. They may not be as quick as they used to be, and I understand that, but we are back up to doing it, which is why, as soon as we knew that, we were reopening and have reopened now for everyone. So there is going to be a bit of a backlog. You'd expect that. Sadly, that seems to be the case in every walk of life, doesn't it? But there does seem a backlog. We will get through them as soon as we possibly can. I would ask you, please, though, to be patient. We are not twiddling our thumbs. We are getting through them as fast as we can, but it does require that health information for reasons that I'm sure are really, really plain.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think it's also fair to say, and credit to Olivia in Hampshire Constabulary, that that after the tragedies that happened in Plymouth, with somebody who'd obviously been suffering with mental health issues, who did have access to a firearm, the government were looking to all forces to look at what they did, and you know, the best practice here from Hampshire was something that was, you know, is being adopted and is being taken on by a number of other forces in terms of making sure that GP report is on file when the application is granted and processed, which I think is key. Right, so another question. A report recently this week has stated that drug driving has overtaken drink driving. Are Hampshire Constabulary well placed to be able to tackle this growing crime?
Yes, so we absolutely are, and I'm really pleased to see the change in legislation that's happened this week. So hopefully you've all seen it, that holding your phone at all whilst driving is a very serious offence. It used to be only using it for voice, because of course that's what phones used to be for back in the dark ages. So the law has caught up, and now it is an offence to use your phone at all. And in fact, only 3 days ago, there was a big roads policing operation based around fleet services, which was as much about awareness raising as it was enforcing. So reminding people that the law has changed. And we're pretty ingenious, you know, we'll do that. And on that operation, it was only a day, but they covered 900 miles of patrol. They stopped loads and loads of vehicles. They dealt with over 100 issues, and they ranged from warnings about load security and lane discipline and that kind of thing, but also enforcing people for using their phones whilst driving, due care of attention and so on. Drug driving, we have all sorts of equipment now that we can use at the roadside to test someone for lots and lots and lots of illegal drug misuse, which is very similar. I mean, it's kind of swabs, but you know, it gives the same kind of readout as what people are perhaps more familiar with, which we've had for decades, about knowing, you know, being able to indicate someone's alcohol in their body. So we have all that, and we use all that, and all of our roads policing people have all of that kit with them 24/7. So we are doing that routinely. It's really great when we get intelligence from someone, and we use community intelligence, and you can tell us anonymously if you're worried that someone is out driving with drugs in them, or they're about to leave a premise and you think they're drug driving. We would much rather, and I'm sure you would much rather, we got ahead of them and stopped them ploughing into a pedestrian, ploughing into somebody else, as well, of course, as the harm they can do themselves. The other thing we do, about, if I can just stick with use of phones as well, we can be pretty sneaky. So we will sit on buses and look down on drivers who are using their phone, because of course you can only have to look in the driver's window to see what they're doing. So we'll do that sometimes too, and we've done that around a number of our cities, putting some of us on a bus looking down into drivers. So I really encourage you just to stick the phone in your glove box, get rid of it, get it out of temptation's way, because there's a lot of points if you get caught, but more importantly, it's hugely dangerous.
Yeah, and there are also cameras on quite a few actually, traffic lights, aren't there, as well? So even if you're stationary at traffic lights, they're red and you have a little sneaky look, that's also illegal, isn't it, Olivia? Because you are still behind the vehicle of your car and you are still in control of that vehicle, even though you may be stationary. Okay, so there's been quite a few questions that have come in about the speeding traffic and particularly around 20-mile-an-hour zone. So question from Linda Richardson. Speeding is a problem in most country villages. Most London boroughs now have 20-mile-per-hour speed limits, and this has led to reduced overall speeds. Will you support 20-mile-per-hour speed limits in Hampshire villages?
So I really understand how frustrating and frightening that can be. And there are a number of our villages across in the county that actually do have 20-mile-an-hour limits. What I would really encourage people to do, and I know this happens, is to engage with, first of all, your local authority to raise your concerns formally. There are various things that they can do, and if you've got a community speed watch, their data is also taken into account in terms of what's going on. So the case kind of needs to be made. Then it's a question of, what tools can be addressed. So yes, of course, enforcing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is there. What I will not promise and cannot promise is that we're able to enforce every single one. But there are some brilliant examples, and you see it as you go around the county, where you've got things like chicanes and the flashing reminders telling you what speed you're going. And most people conform with that. And it's a reminder to kind of slow up and make sure you're sticking to the rules. And most people do that. And of course, when most people do that, it actually makes it really difficult because of the slowness of traffic for other people who might want to abuse it and whiz through at a dangerous pace. They can't do it because they're in a line of traffic. So there is something about being together in this and keeping speeds down. So I'm supportive where the case is made. What I cannot promise is that enforcement is the only way that will be dealt with. It needs to be engineered out, which is where chicanes come in, that kind of thing, as well as education with those flashing cameras, those flashing speed signs and so on. So, if people are worried, I would, get together as a community, put that in. Parish councils are really powerful around this, into districts, make the case, and together with our local authority partners, we'll take that very seriously.
That's really, really good news. And I've been to a couple of barn meetings. I've had a number of bits of casework, people writing to me about this very issue. And that has exactly been my point, that, for the law abiding people, when they drive into a village and it flashes and says 30, 20 as you're approaching, and then gives you a sad red looking face when you might be doing 31, 32, it makes you slow down. And for the vast majority of law abiding citizens, it's absolutely fantastic. I really like, they're called sin signs. Speak to your councillors about some sin signs. And they also often have a community pot of money from planning, from new development, which they can pay for those sin signs too. They're not particularly expensive. I think a few £1,000s. Right, another question now onto the protests that happened this week. Because there were protests in the water as well as on the land in terms of the stop oil, are Hampshire Constabulary best placed to be able to prevent protests such as this? So
we are used to lawful protest, we're used to peaceful protest, and we have a job to make sure that protest doesn't stop people going about their business, doesn't create danger for other people, doesn't prevent business functioning. And the protests that happened earlier, a few days ago, on both sides of Southampton Water, were actually on the land, but the disruption was on the water. So there are a lot of big ships kind of queued up, waiting to come in to the two processing plants, but they were on the land. And we dealt with them, I'm not going to say robustly, because I'm not going to use that word anymore, but we dealt with them very creatively and very swiftly, actually. I was kept updated all during the day on Friday, and they were dealt with much earlier, frankly, than I thought they would. Because often when people do what we call lock on, when they attach themselves in whatever way they're going to attach themselves to the fabric of the road or to railings or whatever else, we actually do have a duty to get them off, yes, but to do that without injuring them. So it can be very, very slow, and it can be very delicate. But we used some more creative ways to get people to choose to move themselves this time. I was really pleased with that, because there were, they had various vehicles blocking roadways and gateways and stuff like that. So we did that on Friday.
Excellent.
We
Awesome.
can deal with protest on the water. We do have our own marine unit. We would, by the very nature of our geography, with our county and our island and our cities, and they do have a number of tactics to deal with protest on the water as well. Sorry.
No, and actually that's what I was going to say then, was something about the marine unit. It's just worth explaining to people maybe sort of about a little bit about the capability of the marine unit, because a lot of people don't realise we've got it, do they? So there's the Defender boat, and there's the RIBs, and very, very highly trained.
They're very highly trained, very skilled officers and volunteers who work on our marine unit, and they're there for a number of things. They're there most of the time for patrolling the neighbourhood that is Solent Water. So that's both the marinas themselves, where all that very expensive equipment is, and also of course the people who are enjoying the water in their thousands as well. So they are the neighbourhood policing of the water, if you like, most of the time. They also have responsibilities around things like serious organised crime, about they work alongside Border Force and the National Crime Agency a lot. Because people obviously have to get things illegally into the country, which Border Force and the National Crime Agency lead on, but our marine unit help them in terms of intervening when that's going on, stopping people getting in, making arrests, that kind of thing, but also looking for vulnerable people who are being trafficked illegally into all trafficking is illegal, but trafficked into this country across our border. So they're looking out for that, for vulnerable, really frightened people all the time. So they're always out looking for that, even though when they're doing their other work. And they're also there, as has been said, for protests as well. And you'll remember, we have had some on-water protests, and they are very good at intervening. They have really good tactics, which they exercise all the time, and can, swiftly intervene with quite a lot of things that happen on the water. So they're really good. They're very highly trained. They're very well equipped. And that's their job, and they do it not just across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight area, but they also work with their similarly skilled and equipped people, colleagues across the rest of our coast as well. So they connect with Kent, with Sussex, across to Dorset and down to Devon and Cornwall, but also with Border Force and the NCA, like I've said.
Fantastic. Well, we're into the last 13 minutes now. I've been trying to group questions. We had 2 or 3 about 20-mile-an-hour zones. We had 2 or 3 about ASB, so a couple about policing numbers, stuff about the Isle of Wight. So I've been trying to keep an eye on what's going on. I've got my phone here, so I'm kind of watching all the comments online as well. And I might be jumping around topics a little bit more now in the last 12 minutes to make sure that we get through them. So a question from Jason Piggott. Can you ask Olivia why she has taken... she says she has taken appropriate action against ASB and motorbikes being stolen and driven. Can I ask why are the police not doing anything regards reckless use of e-scooters? E-scooters comes up every single COP session, so we could not have one pass without an e-scooters question.
Well, we do a lot around e-scooters, and I can update you what we've been doing since last time we met, because it is, you'll be aware there are legal trials going on, and please, any feedback on those trials, please put them in to the local authorities, because they want that, because that will help form whatever the legislation ends up looking like. We know that they can contribute to antisocial behaviour. We know that they've actually contributed on occasion to some pretty awful incidents as well, and some awful injuries to people. Tiny numbers by the greater use of them. I know that. It's exactly like normal car use. There are awful things that happen, but the vast majority of people are safe. But we have seen that, and that's been really, really tragic. We are now getting a picture, and I've had a picture through this kind of question of where, time again, there is antisocial driving going on of these e-scooters. So we're using our powers, our antisocial behaviour powers in those kind of areas as well. And since we last spoke about it, since we last had this meeting, we've had local operations specifically around e-scooters running in Portsmouth, in Southampton, on the Isle of Wight. We've seized 9. We've done 28 first warning letters where we basically told people enough. This is what we're going to do. So a formal warning into people, which usually works. And usually people go, right, okay, got it, and they regulate themselves afterwards. We've also suspended a hire account where actually a child was using it, but it was an adult's account. So someone had set an account up and then let their child use it. So that account was suspended. And we do have, we do follow up with whenever we're contacted by groups, and we make sure that we're looking at those certain areas. So we've done a lot. We still do use our 3 E's: engage, educate, and enforce at the end. We do that. Most people respond well to, you're driving it in a way that's frightening other people, putting other people in danger, don't do it. Most people respond to that. But it is something that I'm very keen for, in the end, the legislation to tighten this kind of stuff up, because it is the blurring between, in my view, the pilots and then the private ownership. And I think that's still confusing for a lot of people. So that's where we try and educate them if we can.
And I just want to say on this one as well, a little bit of a pushback, I suppose, to the government, because I have written to the DFT about this, is that, like with so many things, a new idea comes down the track, people start, popular shops, we won't name the brand, start selling mopeds for 350, 450 pounds. So within grasp of many people. But the guidance from the government is not clear. The how to use them, they're making it absolutely clear by a national campaign like Clunk Click Every Trip, or the dangers of smoking. And you used to see all those sort of horrible adverts in bus stops of lungs that look all black and full of tar. So actually, when the government want to use effective campaigns, they can do. But actually, there's been, because the trials aren't going on across the whole of the UK, because they are only in certain locations, we happen to have 2 or 3 going on here in Hampshire, there hasn't been the best messaging, I would say, on this one in government. And actually what that's then meant is that policing has to pick up the pieces when there's already loads of other stuff going on as well. So it is complicated. I do think the government needs a clearer position on private ownership on scooters, either ban them completely or say, yes, you can have them, but this is how they must be used. You must have an MOT, you must have insurance, you must be over the age of 16 or whatever the specifications are the government wants. But we do need to have clearer, and I've spoken to a number of our local MPs about that too. Okay, another question. This one is anonymous. It comes from a lived experience. Why is it that police do nothing about violent men who are released from prison after prison and break a restraining order, which leaves the victim constantly living in fear while constantly having to chase the police to act on this?
I mean, I'm really sorry if that's your experience. That is not what should have happened. And I realise it's anonymous, but if you feel able to, please do let me know, and I'll follow up, because I don't want you living in fear if that's how it is. I'm really sorry. Please come through to me, and I'll make sure I follow up. But in general terms, we absolutely do pursue people who are breaching, whether they're civil orders or they're post-custody orders. There's a plethora of different ways that people's behaviour can be restricted, even though they are out and about living in our community. And there are thousands of people, sadly, who are under those kinds of restraining orders, or on various notices and that kind of thing. So we do that, and it is our job, if anyone breaches, to go and find someone and put them back before the court. Now, and we do that. And in fact, I was only talking to colleagues this morning about a couple that we've done over the last couple of days. We do at the moment, it's not a policing matter in the sense that we put them back before the court. Sometimes the courts are limited about what they then can do, and that's frustrating to everyone if actually they're not able to then put them back into prison or whatever else. And there are sometimes good reasons why the court can't do that. I don't say that critically, but it is frustrating, and it's not what the restraining order was intended for, but we do it, and it's something we take very seriously. The way it works is that every day, 24/7, we have points which the Silver Commander, so it's the superintendent who's operationally running the whole of the force in terms of the critical incident side of it. They will know who's coming out, and they will know what we're doing to get hold of people who've breached, and get people back in front of the court and back into prison if that's where they can go. So we do have that rolling grip of all of those kind of people. There are a lot, there's a different issue there about society and people within it. But that's, the police's job is very clear in these matters, and we do go after them.
Thank you. And the anonymous lady who asked the question has come back to say that she will email you directly. Thank you very much for that. The question, do the police have the ability to make inquiries to find out who owns an Instagram account? Instagram is regularly used for selling stolen items.
Yeah, absolutely. We do. There are rules about it. So, I mean, I would say almost all crime now has an element of digital or cyber enablement. That is normal business now in terms of how people commit crime. So if you think about something that happens in the streets, even chances are it's been videoed by someone, so actually even to that level. But most fraud now is online. We've seen recent national statistics about the prevalence of that. I'm sure we all do what we can to keep our passwords safe and make sure that we're protecting our online presence and our data as much as we lock our back door. So that matters, and the prevalence of that is huge. And it is normal policing business now in everything, whether that's harassment or antisocial behaviour sometimes, or abuse, certainly domestic abuse, huge amount of cyber and digital side of that. So we do have the ability to trace back for people's accounts. We do have some pretty good wizardry as well for when things are encrypted. Clearly there are different legal standards we need to adhere to, and legal authorities we need to have for some of those higher end intrusive tactics, if you like, but it is something that we do all the time, and all of our investigators, all of our officers and our police staff investigators have that capability, and that we also have some specialist investigators whose job is to investigate digital only offences where you have to have some kind of, as I say, wizardry to kind of get behind and really follow the evidence down the digital track. But they do that, and some of that, of course, involves identifying online users too.
That is fantastic. And just a positive comment actually here from Shane Woolmore, who says we should be incredibly proud of our officers throughout the country. The job is getting harder. Some of the complaints officers get are pathetic, and we need to be dealt with quicker. So some positive feedback. Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen in the 10 months I've been involved, it's an incredibly challenging job with a real variety of skills that officers need, whether they be neighbour policing officers, whether they be, roads policing team, can you imagine knocking on the door of somebody to tell them that their husband, wife, son, daughter has been killed in a road accident? I mean, the skills that you need to be able to do that and compose yourself whilst you're doing it and be professional and signpost them to where they need to go and think to tell them the things that they need to be told. We have some incredibly skilled people working for us. There is a question here from Graham Mark. Can you honestly say that we will see more police and get a better service? The council tax goes up every year, but we don't seem to see any more police or get a better service. And I think, if it's all right, Olivia, I'm just going to have a quick go at that one, because putting up the police precept each year is not something that myself, Olivia, or any police commissioner that has to do that takes lightly. And the way that the funding formula came this year from the Home Office meant that it was based on an assumption that police commissioners would put the police precept up by a certain amount. If we hadn't have done that, we would have struggled to be able to meet some of the operational demands that were in force. Now, that is not a sustainable position for me, and that is not something that I want to be doing every year. But when we survey people through my office, through councils, and we ask them what their priorities are, people will always say looking after kids, looking after old people, and tackling crime. It's always in the top 3 of things that people want their taxes spent on. Finally, from me, one bit just following on from something Olivia was saying, is that through Hampshire Constabulary, if you witness a crime, there is a fantastic piece of technology that Hampshire Constabulary was one of the first, and is still one of the first forces to be using this. And we funded some more of work to expand this through the budget. It's an app called Good Sam. So if you phone Hampshire Police and you are walking down the street and you see a fight going on or something quite serious, you can phone 909. You can say there is an urgent situation. The call handler, the person at the end of the call centre, can see your mobile phone number, your calling on will be able to send you a text immediately. You say yes and accept to give them the ability to view what's going on through your camera. So you hold your phone up and through clicking yes and accepting the Good Sam app onto your phone, they can then log and see exactly what's going on, and that can be retained for evidence as well. So Hampshire Constabulary really at the forefront of the technology on that piece, and there are so many good things. I mean, we could talk for another hour, Olivia and I, about all the great things that are going on, and perhaps we might just do a proactive one in the future where we are sharing some of the really good updates with you as well. Thank you for all the questions. We are now at 7 o'clock. The hour has come. We've got through a fantastic number of topics: ASB, roads policing, Isle of Wight, loads of stuff. Thank you to those of you who put your questions in. Any that weren't answered, we will be doing our best to get back to you over the next couple of days. Please do share my page, the Constabulary page, with friends and family so that more people follow, so more people can get information in the future. And we bid you a good evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.